Hey guys, what's up and welcome to the channel, Shotgun Shogun, and this came across my my feed a little bit earlier today. I know it was released, I think, yesterday, I believe. Anyways, I thought this was kind of interesting. This is the World of Reason Season 1 Top 5 Bands. Now, I wanted to go over this. I want to see what their metrics are, because obviously they're pulling stuff from the back end, and I wanted to talk a little bit about these top 5 bands. I haven't actually watched this yet. This is the first time I have seen this, so I don't know what they are. I have a good idea, and being a top-ish tier player myself, I want to give you guys a little bit more insight into these, as well as what I usually see. And the other thing, I want to talk a little bit about how this also changes depending on where you are in the ladder of play. So first, without further ado, let's get into the beginning of this. We got the nice silky smooth new voice here.
Please keep in mind that data does change per region. This means that the global top 5 bands, Asia top 5 bands, as well as the Europe top 5 bands do differ to an extent, but for this list we're going to be looking at an overall average.
It's interesting that they have that based on region as well.
Concise, we do know that there are both pre-bands.
Also, who brings
bands,
Elfelt, Celine, Lilius, and Dizzy against a team? And who doesn't ban CDOM?
But again,
who doesn't ban CDOM on here?
We're going to be merging these two data together. Commentary and reasoning may be subject to personal experience, as experiences may vary. Like, for example, if you have a 300 speed Basar, you're probably never going to ban Basar.
Got a little bit of mic pop there, dude.
Most banned hero in World Arena, it does tend to fluctuate between these two heroes.
Okay, so 4th and 5th is Krau and Faithless Lidica. So Faithless Lidica is 5th and Krau is 4th. Now, Krau is a very, very disgustingly OP knight, right? If you fought against a Krau, chances are you're not killing him fast. He's going to horse you. He's got defense buff. He's got provoke. He can carry an Arius or an adamant. And if you use Holy Sacrifice Krau, you are literally probably one of the worst human beings to ever exist on this planet. And you also probably don't use your blinker when you're moving into the left-hand lane on the highway. With that said, Faithless Lidica, after her buff, became one of the most disgusting enablers in the game as well, considering the fact that one of the big problems that she had early on is that if you have a Seaside Belle on the other team, you would S2, put 4 charges on there, then your S3 would hit Seaside Belle would hit you with the S2, doing a ton of damage. Now with the skill nullifier, the one thing you do have to watch out for, though, is the fact that if you do push somebody before her, like let's say a C-Dom or anybody who's really fast, it is going to screw that up. Your skill nullifier is not going to be up to prevent that damage, but even if it is, you will get the defense buff probably. But let's see what they say about
technically it's a tie,
these two.
But we're going to be covering both Krau and Faithless Lidica. Across all ranks, it's pretty common knowledge that Faithless Lidica is a high threat setup for fast-paced teams, while Krau on the other hand is a high threat for slower-paced ones. Krau is perhaps one of the safest World Arena picks, as he provides the team with a defense buff, Aureus damage mitigation, and a reliable one-shot via his third skill, Summon Siegfried.
Now, I will agree with you there. Now, on this team right here, honestly, I probably would hit. Well, first off, this is a pretty weird draft, right? Especially for like a champion play. You don't have, I guess you're going damage to damage. If you would have had more mitigation in there, if you would have put in like a Deanna or a Ruel or something along those lines, that is typically what you see when you see a first pick Krau, right? First pick Krau into Ruel means that you're not going to burn that team down anytime soon. It's going to be really big pain in the butt. Those two typically come together, but even Krau just by himself, especially like let's say in this setup right here, right? Krau's going to bring that extra defense buff, although you are overlapping defense buffs with Alencia here. But overall, it's some weird drafting here, but that's completely aside, right? The things that they do mention here are the things that I mentioned when it comes to Krau. Krau's probably one of my most hated units, just because of Horse. There's nothing really that you can do against it, and a lot of times, especially if you bring moderate amounts of damage, right? Your Alencia jumps in, hits the S3, all of a sudden Krau is in horse range, and well, you're in a bad spot. You are in a bad spot. Now let's see what he says about Faithless Lidica, right?
Lidica, on the other hand, has perhaps one of the most loaded upfront initial turns. Not only is she able to boost the combat readiness of her allies by taking the first turn, she's also able to strip one buff, apply cooldowns onto a single target, and apply skill nullifier. Arguably the best setup hero for any player looking to cleave their opponent. You don't typically see Krau banned in lower ranks, and most games are typically played in upper ranks, so it may come off as a surprise to most of you to see Krau as a top 5 ban. Third on the list.
Okay, third up is going to be Seaside Belle, and I can absolutely see this one. Hold on, my headphones are acting up here. All right, so with Seaside Belle is, I'm actually really surprised that Seaside Belle is only third most banned, because Seaside Belle is kind of like Arbiter Vildred in the way that you kind of have to shift the way that you play, right? Now, early on, you will have a lot of people running very glass cannon Seaside Belle. The higher you get into play, though, the more you're going to find very, very tanky Seaside Belles. People switched away from the high damage glass cannon Seaside Belle to go with a Seaside Belle that has about 1300 defense and like 13 to 16k hit points. Now, the reason being is because you do get that damage share with your front person. But the other thing is that Seaside Belle on Rengar's Drink doesn't have to manage critical hit chance or critical hit damage. It's basically just as much tank and as much attack as humanly possible, because Rengar's Drink is going to do the vast majority of the damage on there. Not only that, but she's going to be a high priority target, unless, you know, they let a Rowana through, in which case you tend to leave the Seaside Belle for the end, which at the same time can also screw you up if you let her ramp up in damage due to frenzy stacks. So Seaside Belle is very, very powerful, probably one of the more cancerous units in the game. Now, there are ways around her, right? You do have things like a Falconeer Quarry into a single target Little Queen Charlotte. Charles is going to correct her posture. Alencia is there to help out. Because of her, you have seen a resurgence in the grass meta, which also has lent itself to the resurgence in some of the fire meta units as well.
List is a hero you may feel as though exists as a default pick in World Arena. With the highest overall pick rate, it's Seaside Bellona. Despite a number of counters to her existing, she's loaded with debuffs, attacks out of her turn, and applies defense breaks consistently more often than not. In most cases,
now, I will disagree with the applying defense breaks more consistently than not. Now, here's the problem with that. Unless you're building some bit of effectiveness on her, you're probably not going to be hitting too much in the way of defense breaks, meaning that a lot of people typically will stack a little bit of effect resist on their units just to overcome people who don't put any effectiveness on their units whatsoever. Now, for me, I run Fire Ravi a lot, right? And I mean, if you follow my channel, you know that I really like effect resist, and that's one of the reasons why, is because if you don't build any effectiveness on like your Seaside Belle, your Alencia, your Charles, your things like that, you're not going to be hitting defense, or you're not going to be hitting debuffs onto any of my units that have around, you know, 85 to 100% effect resist, because if you have 100% and they have 0, that just straight up negates any debuffs that they would be putting on there. Now, I have seen a lot of people switching their Seaside Belles up to having about 50 to 60 effect resist. This is going to overcome a lot of just the standard effect resist or effectiveness. This is going to overcome the standard effect resist that you get like residually through a lot of just your random gear. This is going to overcome people who try to run like, you know, 100, like me, who run 100% effect resist just to bypass some of that. So you will see that quite a bit, and like New said, you are going to be getting a lot of off turn S2s, which is going to result in a fair to moderate amount of defense breaks. Now, again, characters like Charles, Alencia, Falconeer Quarry, things like that were put in here. Well, Falconeer Quarry wasn't put in here to counter Seaside Belle, because Falconeer Quarry is OG OP, but a lot of these units, the grass units in general, do help counter her, although much like Kayron and Charles himself, what even is elemental disadvantage when it comes to Seaside Belle? Again, also coupled with Rengar's Drink, she doesn't actually need to hit you to do damage.
A lot of her debuffs do counter many well-established World Arena heroes. Additionally, a lot of her debuffs do counter her counters as well. She has a wide variety when it comes to how she's built, so it can be intimidating when you're drafting against her, as you're not too sure if this is a tanky Seaside Bellona or it's a very DPS focused Seaside Bellona. Coming in second is a hero.
For the most part though, if you go up against a Seaside Belle, assume that it's tanky. That seems to be pretty much the go-to these days. Even if it is a little more focused towards damage, it's still going to be tanky, mostly because if you don't build it tanky, it's just gonna die. And DPS can't DPS if they are dead. Now, number 2 is going to be Basar, and I'm almost guarantee number 1 is going to be Arbiter Vildred. That's just how that's going to be, and I'll talk a little bit about how some of the units that I personally ban.
All PvP related content. Not only does Basar enable CC compositions, cleaves, and flexes into bruiser teams as well, he's perhaps the strongest disabler and enabler in the game. Oftentimes the only reliable means of dealing with him is to outspeed him, which can be quite a challenge as he doesn't really need any other stats besides speed and effectiveness.
Now, one of the problems with just running speed and effectiveness, right, is that if you don't have a team to back him up, if he's really, really squishy, if you're running a bruiser tank team, sure, unbuffable is going to be pretty bad, but you usually can cleanse that, let's say, with like a DN. Now, the team that he's going up against, this team has no cleanse. It's going to just get deado right here. This is not a good matchup. Usually if you're running something, you're going to want to run some sort of cleanse, especially if you plan on letting a Basar through. But here's the thing is, if you don't have that follow-up, he's just going to die, right? Even if he gets the S2 off. Now, the one thing is, if you do run into like... and one of the Basars that actually trips me up quite a bit is a slower Basar, and a slower, tankier Basar, so that you can't just kill him straight out. Because what will happen is you'll assume that the Basar is super fast, right? And you will come in, but he's like 220 speed. So you have to delay your buffs and try to take him out unbuffed before he can get another turn, because if you buff, he's going to just strip them if you don't kill him. And so that's one of the things you have to worry about. Like in my arena team, I usually run like a Tywin, Elena, Seaside Belle, ML Ken, right? My Elena is like 230, 240 speed. So that way I cut pretty much any sort of other pusher, like a C-Dom, anything like that, just to get, you know, boom, a Tywin takes care of it. And unless you get the random Abyssal Crown stun, Elena's going to get to go and then take care of that. Now, if the Basar is slower than my Elena, I'm kind of screwed because I can't put my Elena S3 up because he'll strip it. But if I don't, then the rest of his cleave team will kill me. So there are a few different ways to run Basar, and you really don't know, especially in arena or in RTA. You just assume that he's going to be fast, right? But like I said, sometimes that tanky, slow, mid-speed Basar is actually going to do more damage to you than the super fast one, because you can adjust for super fast, right? Like I said, a Tywin type deals, you know, a C Zerato is going to be punting things back. You can kind of work around those. Now, with that said, I don't typically ban Basar just because I can usually tank through it, right? Usually I have enough fire units. I'll draft like a Fire Ravi, a Dingo, something like that in order to take care of that. With the mischance, Lilius counters him real hard. But like he was saying, this does enable CC comps, and I think that is one of the more powerful comps in the game, right? A Basar plus Dizzy is going to lock you down so hard that you're just going to have a bad time. Not only that, but every Basar comes with an Abyssal Crown with like a 300% chance to proc on everybody if he even so much as looks at you. But seeing as he's the second highest ban is not surprising in the slightest.
Most would opt to just keep him banned. Leading the top of the bans at number 1 is, to no surprise, Arbiter Vildred. Not only
can you hear the approaching pre-ban. Now, I personally pre-ban Arbiter Vildred almost every single time, and the reason being is I don't have a problem fighting Arbiter Vildred, right? You can just tank down Arbiter Vildred. You can bring Extinction. You could bring Res for yourself. I made Chloe cucks him pretty hard. Blood Moon Haste. Now, the problem being is that if you let him through and you don't plan on banning him, you have to bring 2 counters to him. If you're going to bring Extinction, you have to bring 2 Extinctions. If you bring Blood Moon Haste, you have to bring something else that's going to stop him. A Blood Moon Haste and a Spez, or a Blood Moon Haste and a Lilbet, or something along those lines. And which, if they let both of them through, you kind of have a dead slot, right? So let's say you bring Blood Moon Haste and Spez. Spez can extinct him, but he's not gonna come back to life. So Blood Moon Haste kind of is there. So it still works, but one of the problems is that just drafting Arbiter Vildred changes the way that you have to play. One of the best options that I find is just to bring in Arius Adamant and just tank him down. And Eaton with like a defense buff. Let's say you bring Eaton with DN and Alencia. When that Arbiter Vildred comes back, he's going to do no damage. None. Zero. And you can just Raslaff your way through it. Now, one of the problems is, too, is you don't know what you're going up against when you go up against an Arbiter Vildred. Is it going to be a 240 speed, high damage Arbiter Vildred? Now that is getting a lot more popular just because he's going to die and he's going to come back and do his S3. If you can get an S3 off beforehand, before he dies, that's just extra damage. And the more turns that he gets with Moonlight Dreamblade, the more overall damage that he's going to bring to the table after his revive as well. So that is a very, very popular one. So if he's very fast, you're going to take damage, then you're going to kill him, then he's going to come back and he's going to do even more damage because he already got that first turn. Not only that, but he has a whole additional team with him. A tankier Arbiter Vildred is going to be a lot harder to kill. Same deal, he's going to get more turns. A Glass Cannon, slow Arbiter Vildred, unless you're pushing him with like an Oxlots or something like that, is not nearly as scary as a fast, moderate damaged Arbiter Vildred, just because you're getting that extra damage and you're getting an S3 on top of that. Now with an Oxlots, right, you might get outsped, you might get it might get dead first. Who knows what's going on there. There might be a skill nullifier up, something along those lines. Who knows? But I like the more moderate speed, higher damage Arbiter Vildred. Well, I don't like any of them, that's why I ban him. But it's a lot easier just to ban him and deal with most of the other units. So, which is funny because when I saw a bunch of people, and myself included, pulling for him on the banner, I was like, oh man, can you hear the approaching pre-ban? Imagine pulling for Arbiter Vildred, leveling him up, Mologoring him out, gearing him up to never get to use him in RTA. You actually surprisingly don't see him too much in the higher tier play as well, just because everybody has multiple counters. And like I said, if you just tank down, he is not nearly as scary as some of the other units like Fire Arbiter Vildred. Fire RBK Run is a lot scarier to me than an actual Arbiter Vildred. But that is not a surprise that he's number one.
Commonly owned by most players between Challenger through Legend ranks, he's quite easy to build effectively. Due to his passive Dark Contract, players can typically forego any survivability stats and focus on strengthening pure offensive stats. He's flexible to cleave, counter cleave, or a bruiser team. Applies a powerful blind debuff, can reset his third skill cooldown alongside
the blind debuff it sucks too.
Effectively.
Real bad.
Extinction, which counters Arbiter Vildred, typically cannot be taken against him in World Arena. This is due to the banning phase, and all Extinction heroes usually require a combat readiness pusher. Do you guys happen to ban any of these heroes? What types of compositions do you all run typically in World Arena?
Okay, so let's that was actually not a surprise in the slightest on what the top 5 were. Like I said, I pre-ban Arbiter Vildred quite a bit. Usually, I'm really surprised though that Ruel didn't make it onto this list, because one of the big things that also works against counter cleave is Ruel. Now, if you're looking for counter cleave, SSB's one, Ruel's one, Elena's one. Now, you wouldn't be too surprising because like not everybody runs cleave, right? You're going to run into a lot of cleave on your way up the chain, but like once you get to high champ, once you get to like legend, it really turns into a bruiser stall meta, just because as you get more gear, the more damage that you can take, right? So you're going to see S10s a lot up there. I used to ban Spectre Tenebria quite a bit until I kind of fleshed out more of my AoE my more AoE units, and I have a little bit easier time dealing with her. But one of the units that I do see banned a lot are support units, because if you only draft one support unit, 2 tanks, and then 2 DPS, if you ban the support and then just try to out DPS them, that is a viable option. But none of these were super surprising. Krau is a big a big ban for me. Same with Arbiter Vildred. I don't typically ban Basars just because I do have some counters to him, and I think that actually with Mui coming out, that Basar, Mui, Dizzy, debuff teams are going to be a much bigger threat coming up in the future, and a lot of people are going to start running those. I did see quite a few of those up in Legend tier, and they're a pain. They suck. It's like, man, sure would like to take a turn. Oh, I'm pushed back. Oh, I'm stunned. Oh, I'm blind and attacked down and slowed, and now I'm stunned again. Awesome. So I do see in the next season a bit of a rise of more CC controlled debuff teams, which is actually some of the teams that I like running myself, because, well, I am kind of a jerk when it comes to things like that, and I'm like, man, you know what I would like? You to never take a turn. But what do you guys think of the top 5 bans? I mean, it pretty much seemed, I kind of knew what it was going to be as it came through. But like for me, I think that like it changes a lot, especially like with pre-ban versus like actual draft ban, right? Pre-ban is pretty typical, pretty cookie cutter, but like once you get into like the regular ban phase, then it becomes a lot different. Like I've had some people ban some stuff that I'm just like, wow, really, you banned that? Falconeer Quarry gets banned quite a bit just because of how oppressive Falconeer Quarry is. A Tywin started to get banned a lot during the end of the season because after his buff he became one of the more oppressive units in the game. FCCs are probably should have been on there for honorable mention. If they ban Fallen Cecilia, they're going to cleave almost 100% of the time. If a Fallen Cecilia ban happens, just get ready to get cleaved, because otherwise, I mean, nobody who doesn't cleave pre-bans Fallen Cecilia. Somebody's going to come in the comments and go, well, I pre-ban Fallen Cecilia and I run a stall team because I need to be different than what you said. But honestly, I do think that those were pretty good. I would put probably Spectre Tenebria up in there just because as you climb a little bit higher, Spectre Tenebria, Kayron, things like that, do see a little bit more in the way of bans. And it would be interesting to see the metrics for like post-pick ban as well, because I bet it would be a lot different, because like pre-ban, completely different than post ban. You get a lot more different things in there, and you ban based off of your comp versus their comp. That would be kind of cool metrics to see. But overall, I really do like videos like this. I hope that they keep doing this and put out more metrics of things and you know, how things are. But those are definitely some solid picks when it comes to the bans. But again, let me know in the comments what you guys saw. Do you agree with this list? Are these your most feared units? And if you guys haven't yet, as always, think about hitting the subscribe button, smashing the bell notification if you want to. If you don't, that's fine too. I might be doing more of these as they put out things, more reactions to stuff like this. If you like this, let me know down below, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Take it easy, homies. Peace.
Cracky.